5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome to Class Bravo, the podcast for aviation professionals and aviation nerds like us. I'm Cory.
And I'm Ray, and we're your hosts.
So a lot has happened since our last episode, Ray. I mean, it's been a crazy news cycle.
It really has, and some sad stuff has come out of it, too. That Atlas crash that happened a couple weeks ago, Flight 3591, I believe.
Yeah, that was the number.
Yeah, I just, for both of us, we want our prayers and condolences to go out to the families affected by this tragedy, but we wanted to pay homage to them today, especially.
Absolutely. Aviation is such a small industry that we all really feels like a family. So when a crash occurs wherever in the world, whether it's the United States or South America or Asia, we all feel it, and it all brings our hearts. Our hearts go out to everybody involved. And the thing with this incident, with this accident was, Ray and I somehow, somewhere, were connected to some of these crew members. I worked with one of them previously with another company. So it's always a hard thing to see people that involved in incidents like this.
Especially for something like aviation. I think one of the reasons that you feel that family aspect is we love this industry and we love what we do. And I think especially, being a pilot, getting my pilot's license, I love flying. And I know that these guys loved flying too. And it's hard to see someone, something like this happen to someone doing something that they loved. So
absolutely. And I just want to kind of recap what Atlas is. Atlas is not a passenger airline. They are a cargo airline, so they carry freight for manufacturers, companies, and this particular airplane was flying for Amazon. It was part of the Prime Air fleet. So the way it works is these companies go out, they find a operator, and that company operates the flight. So the airplanes are either wet leased or dry leased, and Amazon had leased that airplane. Atlas was providing the pilots and the control of that airplane, as well as maintenance, etc. So it's sort of like a regional mainline type relationship.
Explain that, because some folks may not know that relationship, and that's a great way to put it.
Oh boy. So if you've ever flown on a very small airplane, 50 passengers to maybe 76 passengers, those airplanes are typically operated by a third-party company. So you have United, and then you have United Express operated by you have Commuter, you have Republic, you have Mesa, you have ExpressJet, you have Commuter, and then
GoJet,
you also and GoJet, and then for Delta you have Endeavor, you have Compass, SkyWest, Republic again, and then for American you have a whole lot more, but you get the idea. So the way it works is that the regional is being paid on a per flight basis typically, and then sometimes you get into revenue sharing and those kinds of things. So that's really just how it goes and how it works. So this was one of those types of operations.
Yeah. I think speaking of Atlas and this particular accident, we wanted to start kind of a new segment in our conversation, our podcast is, I think as Cory knows, I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan and I love all of his movies. And I think something that would be kind of cool to introduce today is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think the good is that we're getting to see drone usage by the NTSB. And I think it's got a lot of great capabilities.
Absolutely. Drones are, it's kind of a sore subject for some people because it's in some senses taking some jobs from aviation and putting into other things. But really, drones, in this case, the NTSB is using them to get information that previously they would have had to either use a helicopter or an airplane to fly overhead and take pictures. And there's always a downside to using an airplane, that's cost. But a helicopter, depending on where it is, the rotor blast can destroy evidence. So in this case, they're using the drones to get, that kind of first look of it from an aerial perspective.
Well, and the great thing, too, is speaking about helicopters, it's the deployment of the helicopter. That takes time, and you want to preserve the crash site, like you were saying. You don't want the rotor wash to destroy anything, but you also want to keep maybe the operation going if it's at an airport or whatever. So you want to be able to get in and get out and be efficient with your time. And I think the deployment of a drone is just so fast. I mean, you've got a guy with a backpack, he just pulls it out, turns it on, and he can map the entire area within minutes.
Absolutely. And I think the NTSB is using this in order to have that capability, especially when there is water involved. And on a scene like where this accident occurred, winds shift, etc., water gets pushed, it can start destroying the information that they need. So getting that up as fast as possible is, really what's needed. Now, what's interesting about this is that the person that is leading this investigation, Bill English, is also the same guy that for the NTSB, he actually created the drone program.
Yeah, and one of his quotes from Bill is, "We have a very good, solid bedrock foundation for how to conduct robust investigations. That foundation lets us use cutting-edge technologies like this to improve the quality and efficiency of safety work," and end quote. And that goes back to what we were saying, is that it improves the quality. I mean, the picture quality on drones is amazing, and the ability to capture that entire area that fast with that clear of a picture and that mapping capability, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Well, exactly. And the author of this article, and I believe this was actually an article from Forbes, if I'm not mistaken, Christy wrote this, and, she really captured some good points. It gives you the ability to capture certain perspectives and the position of the wreckage that may be unstable or hazardous for an investigator to approach or to go to a certain angle. So, a lot of people think of these drones as being flown at, 200 feet up in the air and just getting a top-down type thing. But it can also go into areas where maybe we don't want to put a boat, or maybe we don't want a person standing right there, because if that wreckage or, thing falls or sways, it could hurt a person. So it could also be flying at 3 feet off the ground, 5 feet off the ground. So it's definitely, I think it's good that they're using it. I'm glad that they have this technology to be able to do that, because really the more information that they can gather on an accident, the better the investigation is. They're able to see a whole lot more.
Absolutely. And this preserves it intact, and they can have it for years to come if they need to revisit, or they think of a different thing that they want to research within the crash. They've got it mapped out for them, and it's preserved perfectly. So I think that's awesome. I think that hate that the accident happened, but grateful that we have the technology to learn from the accident and be better for it.
Well, and I think, at every accident we learn something, whether it's a fatigue issue, which this accident, I don't believe fatigue was involved at all. And really, Ray and we know nothing about how this accident could have occurred. And that brings me kind of to another subject, is that right after this aircraft crash, there was a lot of media reports where, they were trying to ask, what could have happened? What happened? And it seems like every time there's a accident, we get all of these so-called experts on Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, where they're just, talking about an accident, and they're all saying something different because they don't actually know what happened.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they don't have the access to the investigation because it's under investigation. It's the NTSB's territory. They have control of that area until they're done with it. And until they release their final report, we don't know what actually happened. And I think that's important for those that are interested in this type of thing, is that they'll release some preliminary results, but that's still not the final until you get the final report from the NTSB.
Exactly. Now we'll switch gears a little, since we're talking about drones. I know you found an article about that we're titling "The Bad Drones Impeding Airports." You want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that, as an industry, we're seeing, from the airport perspective, is folks flying their drones in and around, airspace that's, restricted. So, or not restricted, but like Class Bravo airspace, where you've got commercial airliners flying in and having issues with them being on site and not being able to see them and being able to detect where the drones are. And that's become a big issue for airports especially.
Exactly. I think these drones, while it's an amazing invention, it is great for certain purposes. We're also seeing some really dangerous situations occurring from them. And one of the things that scares me is people that fly these drones close to airports, whether it's, 100 feet up, 500 feet up, or even 1,000. Some of these little drones that you can buy for $1,000, you can get up to 1,200 feet up in the air
easily and
easily.
Fast.
Yeah. Well, you and I, we've flown one of them, and the thing is incredible, but it's also very dangerous. And I think a few months ago, back in January, we saw one of the busiest airports in the world actually shut down repeatedly over the course of days. I'm talking about Heathrow in England, where they kept seeing these drones flying. And they could not figure out where this drone was or where it was coming from, because the thing can zip around, it can move, and it's small. So
right.
That's the ugly. The ugly with drones is we've got an airport that's shutting down, that's affecting thousands of flights, impacting
hundreds of thousands of people trying to get places. Yeah. It completely shuts down the operation.
And it got to the point where the UK actually brought in the armed forces. They brought the military in to try and stop this drone. That's pretty crazy.
It really is. And it reminds me back to that time that you and I were flying your drone. I mean, we were hanging out at a football field, it's 100 yards long. So, and just like that, you lose sight of it. If you're not paying attention, it's away from, and it's just like that. It's with the snap of a finger. It's that fast. And
we knew where we were flying it to, and we still lost track of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So that to me is the biggest issue here is, there are multiple ways that these types of devices could be used heinously. And, we want people to enjoy them, but we want you to use them responsibly. I think at the end of the day is, we saw the good from what the NTSB is using them for, but we also see the ugly for what some people have used them and misused them. So it's important to us that they're used correctly for
Absolutely.
fun and enjoy them.
for fun, for business, for, the government, government agencies to use. Keep innovating, people, keep using them, but please be safe and don't fly them around airports.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Please don't do that.
So we've been talking a lot about, manufacturers on some of these episodes, but and as well as, big news items. But here's one of the things that really affects a lot of GA pilots is this app called Foreflight. I'm not sure, Ray, if you used that when you were training with the helicopters.
I didn't per se, but I had a couple of buddies that I was in class with that did, and they loved it.
Yeah, I mean, the app is incredible, especially with how small the team was that was building this thing. I mean, they had, I think it was 50 people that I saw that built this app and, really kept it up to date. Really
Right.
Came around 2007 is when it started. The really interesting thing, and I think it shocked the GA community as well as the commercial community, was that Boeing bought them.
Right. Yeah, I think that's interesting. All this acquisition that's going on in the industry.
Well, and it's sort of like, why is Boeing buying this kind of product? And, it kind of brings you into this funky territory of, is that because they're looking to get into the software business? Are they looking to integrate that with their airplanes, their commercial airplanes, of course? And, I know a lot of the GA community is kind of worried about it. And I think that the GA community will be pleasantly surprised that typically when Boeing buys a company and they say it's going to remain independent, it remains independent. And things don't just change overnight with Boeing, with the companies they acquire. So I think, there's a lot of fear out there, but they kind of just, it's okay. Boeing is a big company. Foreflight is secure for, probably the next 50 plus years, and not really to worry.
Yeah, I think one of the quotes that we have from this article, Rob Mark, the author, said, Boeing says Foreflight's acquisition aligns with Boeing's growth strategy of complementing organic investments with targeted strategic investments that position the company for long-term growth. I think organic is important. It just kind of flows together. It makes sense that Foreflight has been such a strong software within the industry that it makes sense that we incorporate it into the commercial side of the house. But I agree. Boeing's they're going to separate, they're going to let them have their, as you were saying. So I don't think GA has anything to worry about either.
No, I don't foresee Boeing going 6 months from now and doubling the price either. So,
Right.
All those GA guys out there, I know you're freaking out. I see all the posts on Facebook and Reddit and conversations at, meetups, and it's, don't freak out.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I think that was the good story for Boeing, but I think we have a little bit of a
uglier story
for Boeing if we're going down that route.
I think so too.
The Air Force has been looking for a new tanker. They've been, fighting for this new aircraft for a long time, and Boeing was selected as the company creating it, and they started producing these. Now, the huge story a few weeks ago was that Boeing delivered the first two. I think we even talked about on the last podcast. The Air Force took them, started using them, except now we have the ugly, which is the Air Force stopped accepting them.
Yeah, why was that, Cory?
Well, it appears, this is a quote from Air Force spokeswoman Captain Hope. How do you say her last name?
Cronin. Hope Cronin.
Cronin, which is actually, Ray knows her.
A friend of mine.
So she said this in an email, no aircraft have been accepted since then, and deliveries will not restart until the production aircraft are cleared of FOD. And the Air Force and DCMA have approved a corrective action plan by Boeing that will prevent FOD in the future. So I know there was a few acronyms in there, and I'm going to clarify what one of those acronyms is. So if you're in safety at the airlines, or you're a pilot, or you work at an airport, you know what FOD is. FOD is foreign object debris. Now, to a lot of us, that could be a screw, that could be a rock, that could be dirt, sand, whatever's on, the tarmac. So for the purposes of this conversation, FOD, and this is also from the article, I'm going to quote it, Boeing grounded the tankers just over a week ago after loose tools and bits of debris were found in various locations inside completed airplanes. So we don't really know what bits of debris are, but when it says after loose tools, finding loose tools is a bit
well, and here's
concerning.
Here's the thing. It wasn't just one tool. It was noted that there were 8 tools found in aircraft, and it was delivered from the main assembly line. So that's even worse. That's why we're calling it the ugly. It's not just the Air Force finding this, but the fact that these aircraft are built on the 767 assembly line in Everett. So what else could be affected by this, right?
Yeah. And Boeing has a stellar reputation, and, this could be a kind of a one-off event. I know it was multiple airplanes, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that, all these airplanes are flying around with tools in them. I don't think that's the case.
Agreed. I wanted to be that spin that you hear, right? Because that's what we read in the article, is that they wanted to point out specifically that it was on the assembly line of the 767. So back to what you're saying, I agree with you that this is most likely a one-off, but there are people out there that will spin it that way. So
absolutely.
We wanted to bring it back and say, we don't know for sure, but we think this is just a one-off.
And the interesting thing is that, this program has been delayed for years, right? So it's cost Boeing about, I think, what was it, $41 billion? Yes. Is what the government is estimating it's going to cost to develop this airplane. Boeing had $3.6 billion in cost overruns, which is okay. Boeing, they did their math. They figured out, okay, 3.6, we'll still make our money back. But the thing is that now that the Air Force is refusing deliveries, the Air Force is also withholding $28 million per aircraft on each aircraft. Mm-hmm. The final payment until everything is fixed. So, right. We're talking about the FOB, but we're also talking about there are some issues with the refueling systems, which is what this aircraft does. It kind of, refuels other airplanes, mm-hmm. which is interesting.
Yeah, I think just overall, it is an interesting story, and I think the Air Force and Boeing will come up with an appropriate corrective action, and hopefully we'll see in the near future that things get back on track.
Yeah, and I see Boeing taking this, fixing all the issues, identifying what the root cause was, and they'll figure it out. I'm not too worried about that.
I was going to say, you don't get to be Boeing unless you do these things and you take care of issues. So I fully agree that they'll fix it right away and be back to normal.
So, we've talked about Boeing quite a bit. So there's some airline news, which is interesting, with Southwest. So a lot of people know that Southwest did not fly to Hawaii. So why is that? Well, ETOPS, which is extended flight over water certification thing with the FAA. So they didn't have that for a while, but now they do. So Southwest has been fighting to get into Hawaii. They finally got approval, and it will be, this is the crazy thing, they're going to fly from Honolulu to Boston. And apparently that is going to be the longest domestic route flown by any U.S. carrier, which that is a pretty long flight. Even from L.A. to Hawaii is a long flight.
That's what I was saying. I think the simple fact that I can't even fathom how long that flight would be. I don't know that I want nonstop from Boston to Honolulu, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah, right. Because we want to get up and walk around, and
let me tell you a story. Like I think this plays in perfectly with this, and it's kind of funny, not too terribly funny. But I was on a flight from Atlanta to Seattle a couple of years ago, and that's a 5.5 hour flight. Almost 6. And the guy that was sitting with me, bless his soul, I mean, he had kidney stones. Oh. And he was on a flight from Atlanta to Seattle. I mean, the poor guy, he had to get up every few minutes and walk around. He'd have to walk back to the lab and just kind of stand back there because he's in so much pain. I'm like, I can't even imagine that. And that was just for 5.5 hours. I can't imagine what it would be if something like that happened to somebody flying from Boston to Honolulu. But
yeah, and I mean, I don't know if I would be flying with kidney stones.
I agree with you on that, but I think I can't remember exactly what it was something for his business. He had to go, like he couldn't not go, and so I think he just kind of got the short end of the stick there. But yeah, stuff like that happens all the time, and that'd be a tough flight.
So that flight is 10 hours and 15 minutes.
Well, when you think about it, anytime you fly overseas, I mean, those are long flights too. So I guess people can get used to that, I guess, maybe. So.
Hey, if you want a nonstop flight to beaches and ocean, that's what you'll do, right?
Anything for vacation. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other articles I saw was that when Southwest got the approval and they launched it, right? So you can go on their website and you can start buying tickets. They did some analysis and they started to see all of the flights to Hawaii drop in price, which isn't really uncommon for when Southwest enters a market. When Southwest enters a market, there's actually a term called the Southwest effect, which right. is you start to see prices drop sharply because Southwest goes in at such low prices where they're either breaking even and making some money, but they're capturing a market share away from the incumbents, which,
that's been their MO since they started. So
exactly.
That's their business model.
So I know that Hawaiian Airlines, I know that some of the other airlines that operate out of Hawaii must be kind of thinking to themselves, okay, what are we going to do now that Southwest is flying here? How are we going to compete with them?
Hawaiian, Alaska, Delta, everybody. They're going to be.
Everybody.
Yeah.
So, it's been a wild news week, actually few weeks with, with Southwest, Boeing, Airbus, etc. We didn't really talk about Airbus on this episode too much, but, I think we really talked about, the drone issue, the good, the bad, the ugly with drones, Foreflight.
Absolutely. Don't
freak out too much, guys. But, I really appreciate your time, Ray. I think this was a good episode, really capture the big ticket items.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it turned out really good, and I appreciate your time too, Cory. It's always fun to get on and talk about these things and share thoughts and ideas and what we think is going to happen in the next few weeks. Is always nice to predict that too. So, I enjoyed today, and we hope that the rest of you that are listening join on our social media and our website and get in the conversation with us.
Absolutely. And, just as a quick disclaimer for Ray and I, just remember nothing on this podcast reflects our companies that we work for. So everything is our own opinion, our own kind of research. Really what we're doing is we're going out, we're finding the top issues. We're seeing what's going on and adding a little bit of opinion, but it does not reflect back on our employers.
Absolutely. And these articles that we're referencing will be in the show notes, and you'll be able to read them for yourselves and make your own opinion. And that's what we want. We want you to join the conversation and have a nice dialogue about these news pieces that come out the last couple weeks.
Exactly. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. And if you could do us a favor, like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram at Class Bravo, I believe.
Class Bravo Podcast on Instagram, Class Bravo on Facebook. We're also on Twitter as well as Class Bravo. Those will be in the show notes as well.
Great. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Ray, and I hope everybody out there has a great day, great week, great month, and blue skies to all those pilots out there.
Fly safe, everybody. Thanks.